So this is not a political channel, but Sweden.
Så kvart min vinner.
So basically there's been a lot of talk about Sweden banning runes and other Norse symbols. But before I start, a quick disclaimer. So there's a lot of news flying around, and I think a lot of it is hyperbole. I don't think the Swedish government is trying to ban all runes or necessarily even some runes, and I think the claims that they're trying to ban, the other Nordic symbols like Mjolnir and the Falknut and Vegvisir and other things, which I'll talk to about in this video from what we actually do know, is kind of being blown into proportion. That's kind of the Swedish government's fault though, because they were very vague with what they actually wanted to do. But I just wanted to say that a lot of this in the video is speculation based on their statements. They haven't explicitly said we are going to ban XYZ, but they've said we might ban XYZ and, A, B, C, D, Fudag, whatever. So essentially this video is going to be me explaining to the Swedish government why I think it's a bad idea to ban, well, first of all the runes, but I don't think they're going to do that, and also particular runes with particular histories and what they were used for. So I hope you enjoy. Okay, so the Swedish Prime Minister at the start of this year said, "We have started the work of strengthening the law forbidding racist symbols." This carrying on from a directive of the Swedish Government Committee from July of last year, saying the option of introducing a special ban on public use of certain symbols as punishment for incitement against ethnic groups. And in that directive they mention several symbols, although they also mention several unnamed symbols. They say this could spread to other symbols that we haven't mentioned here. And this is where a lot of the speculation has come from, that they do actually mention certain runes, although the speculation has been that then certain symbols like the Falknut and the Mjolnir, so Thor's hammer, and the Vegvisir, which isn't even a Viking Age symbol, that's a later Icelandic symbol, may be among the ones being banned because of association to white supremacist groups. So point number one, runes are an alphabet, just as the letters on your screen are letters in the Roman alphabet, which is, a very common alphabet these days. And of course they were used throughout the Viking Age, is probably what most people associate with runes, although they have actually been in use since at least the 2nd century AD. I think the earliest runic inscription is dated to somewhere like 150 AD. Of course, in Scandinavia they're famous for the large rune stones. We also have the fact that in England a bit earlier on we have runes carved on certain objects. So for example, saxes that are found. So in London there's a very famous one from Sittingbourne in Kent, as well as on other objects. We also have, of course, a lot of runes from Northumbria represent, as well as Frisia, who used a similar alphabet to the Anglo-Saxons, and that's often referred to as the Anglo-Frisian Futhog. Just as with the English alphabet, you can convey lots of different messages with the runic alphabet. So for example, you have some that are erected in memory of people who went out and fought in England and then died. You also have very simple runic inscriptions on objects, often the earlier ones that say things like Alu or Rai, which is roe-deer. As well as Christian messages, remembering people, and also sometimes very vulgar messages. For example, on Mace Howe in Orkney, you have several, really sexual runic inscriptions, and even graffiti that's Halfdan carved. These runes are thought to be what's said on the Hagia Sophia, which is the mosque/cathedral in Istanbul, Constantinople, Byzantium, whatever you want to call it, on top of one of the pillars. Long thought to be a magic inscription, that it was some kind of ritual, and it literally said Halfdan carved these runes as a tourist Viking. Things like comb are written on, as well as really political statements, like this is the inscription from the Jelling runestone, which said that Harald had conquered Denmark and Norway and made the Danes Christian. So you can clearly see that lots of different methods and messages can be conveyed with runes, because they are an alphabet. You can use runes in combination, just like with any alphabet, to convey lots of different messages. Now unfortunately in the 20th century several runes were also used by National Socialists who were interested in the Germanic history of the German people, the Aryan people. So they often used this rune, which is the Othal rune, which had also the significance and the meaning of heritage and inheritance. And so you can see here on a badge of one of the SS divisions that they had the Othal rune displayed. And now this is one of the runes that the Swedish government have mentioned that they would like to ban or potentially ban in the public sphere. This rune. Now the problem is that just like any letter in the Roman alphabet, this is the letter O. So it'd be like banning the letter O in public, or like banning the letter S in public because it appears in the SS. as you can see, it's not a very consistent idea. Now, the thing with runes is, obviously, the Roman alphabet is used, all over the place today in the West, whereas runes aren't. So that is a distinction. But banning this letter because it was used in a bad way in the past doesn't seem to me to be the right answer, because at the same time we can say every German soldier wore this belt buckle which has Roman letters on it saying Gott mit uns. Now, are we going to ban these letters as well because these were used in a bad way in the past? It doesn't seem like the right solution. Now, another one that they've targeted is the Tchaikovsky rune, which is also used by certain groups. This is, for example, the symbol of the Nordic resistance movement, which is a modern national socialist movement around Scandinavia. And they've also proposed that they would ban the Tchaikovsky rune. However, there are several problems with this. So, for example, the Tchaikovsky rune is also just another letter in the alphabet. Context is very important, as I will get onto later. So you can't really go around and just ban a letter in an alphabet because it was used and is used by certain people in a bad way today. It's also an important religious symbol because Tyr is actually the name of a Norse god, and for modern pagans this is an infringement on their right of expression and their right to worship publicly, because this was worn sometimes as an amulet. This was worn as a protective symbol and is a symbol for the god. So if you're banning this symbol in public, you're essentially banning that way of expressing devotion to this god in public. Now, this of course depends on how they're going to ban it, and I don't know how they're going to ban it, but this is a potential issue that the Swedish government should consider if they are going to push forward with this kind of legislation. Obviously, if we look down at our phones, most of us will find two runes straight away. This is actually a ligature between two runes, the H and the B. The B looks very much like the B in the Latin alphabet, probably derives from it, and is obviously the Bluetooth symbol named after Harold Bluetooth, because of his communal gatherings, apparently. So you can see that runes can be used in a modern context with the Nazis or with modern National Socialist movements in a way that we can disagree with, and that's bad, but also in a good way. Like in Bluetooth, for example, it can connect people together. So it really just depends on the context of how these runes are being bad, rather than that a rune is intrinsically good or intrinsically bad. And by banning a rune, you make them intrinsically bad, that in and of themselves, it's a bad letter. Okay, so point number 2, and something I kind of already touched on, is that runes are also religious symbols. Now, there is a whole thing with connecting runes to paganism. They aren't intrinsically linked, and actually we have lots of evidence that runes were being used a lot by clergy in Anglo-Saxon England, and also by Christians in Scandinavia. So it's not that you see runes, a pagan carved that. Much more likely that a Christian carved runes, in actual fact. But they do have certain religious significance to them for pagans, and that's pagans today, and would have had certain significance in certain contexts for people back in the migration era and the Viking Age, as I will explain. So this statement, we've started this work of strengthening the law forbidding racist symbols, which was said by the Swedish Prime Minister. It really depends how you would define a racist symbol. What makes a symbol racist? That's kind of the core of this, because if we're going to say that certain symbols can be used in a racist way, and sure, they definitely can, but does that make that symbol racist 100% of the time, or does that depend on the context in which the symbol is being used? So personally, I wear this symbol every day, which is my Mjolnir, as you can see, and I made this in Denmark when I was 13. You can see on there the Tchur rune, which is there being used as a D, because in the transition from the elder Futhark to the younger Futhark, they got rid of a load of runes. It wasn't particularly clever, so you can see 2 on there. But obviously that doesn't make this top a racist top. This is, by one of my favourite brands, descended from Odin. And then also on my Mjolnir, which I made as a 13-year-old in Denmark, you can see they are the wrong way round, because I made it upside down. And you can see on my Mjolnir it's upside down, but the third letter from the left, you can see that is my 13-year-old attempt at carving an Odal rune. But I don't think that makes my Mjolnir racist, or makes this top racist, because it's being used obviously not in a white supremacist context. So obviously banning certain religious symbols because people that we disagree with use them is not a good idea. I mean, would Sweden ban, because on the ISIS flag you have the Shahada, Would they ban the Shahada? Well, of course not, because that would be ridiculous and overbearing and an infringement of Muslims' rights, just as if they are going to ban, and again, I don't think they are, but they weren't clear enough to put my worries at rest that they are actually going to ban these symbols, which would be an infringement, as I think the largest Swedish Asatru organisation, I think it's the Asafundit in Sweden, have said that it is an infringement on their rights to worship publicly and express their belief in their religion publicly. Okay, so a third point that I'd like to make that I've kind of been alluding to throughout this video is the importance of context. Now, let's go to the next image, which is going to get this video demonetized. But if we see this symbol, obviously the swastika, incredibly polemic symbol in Western Europe. If we see this scrawled on a wall in Western Europe, we have no illusions as to what kind of person put that there. However, context is incredibly important with this kind of thing, because if we see it in this context, it means something very different. This is in fact the symbol of the Jain movement. The Jains are a religious grouping largely in the Indian subcontinent that is based on peace and non-violence, and actually the symbol just below the swastika, the open hand, is the symbol that's used in Indian cultures and Vedic traditions in Buddhism, Jainism and Hinduism largely, for ahimsa, which is the quality that Gandhi put forward, which means non-violence. So clearly this is used in a very different way to as before. Now there's a whole different video about the swastika and different meanings because it's used in lots of different cultures, but obviously today it's incredibly taboo in the West, and I would say for good reason. But this is an important context. Now, when I was in India, there were swastikas everywhere. Now, that doesn't mean that the Indians are all Nazis. The Indians have not got the same history of the swastika as we do in the West, and there it has a very different meaning. This example was in Fatehpur Sikri, which is a very large, splendid Mughal palace in northern India, and in the ground, the swastika had been carved. Now, I don't think that that was carved by someone who was a white supremacist or anything along those lines. And equally, if you look at Anglo-Saxon, this is a pot from, I think it's Spong Hill, Norwich, so it's like 6th, maybe 7th century. Now you see swastikas on this stuff all the time, so the context in which things is used is incredibly important. And that's why, for example, lots of Western countries have banned the swastika, and lots of countries in the former Eastern Bloc have banned not only Nazi insignia, but also communist insignia because of the atrocities committed by those people. However, we have to be very careful about what we want to do if we try and ban racist symbolism. Now, in banning the swastika, I think probably that would be the better solution out of the two, at least for now, while there are still people who, survived the war, and I think it might still be too early to have that conversation about the swastika, potentially. I'm not going to weigh down on either side. However, with runes, I don't think the common association with runes is Nazism. With a swastika and a hammer and sickle in Europe, that's what you're going to think of straight away. I highly doubt that anyone sees the hammer and sickle and thinks, oh, it's agricultural work and industrial work, that they think of tools. They think of communism. If you see a swastika in Western Europe, certainly the first thing that comes to my mind, and I think pretty much everyone else, is Nazism, the Second World War, and everything that stood for. So I can understand with these symbols. But with a Churd rune, with an Oval rune, is that the first thing you think of? It certainly isn't for me, and I don't think it is for most people either. However, if we denote these symbols, which is another point, if we essentially give these symbols over and say, these are now verboten, we can't use these symbols anymore, then you make them hate symbols. Then these symbols become that which you're trying to stop. You literally give agency to the white supremacists, the National Socialists, who are using these symbols in a way that we disagree with and say, yes, you can have these symbols. Why not instead say, right, there are people using these symbols and we don't agree with the way they're using these symbols. So people who are using these symbols in a way that isn't to promote hatred against other people, that isn't to promote division, then, why not use these symbols? Go out in public wearing these symbols and standing for the things that you stand for. as I always wear my Mjolnir out and about. This is me in a museum, and this is me having some fun in Friesland with, reclaiming the Bonifatius and the tree that he cut down in Dokkum. And this is me with my gym squad wearing, runes when we're out and about by Descendant from Odin, which isn't sponsoring this video, but I would like to give a quick shout out to, because they make Norse themed clothing, and then they use 10% of the money to donate to charities, for example, that's helping the environment, which is a key concept that lots of pagan groups are concerned with, as well as not using plastic packaging. It's all organic and biological materials that they use, as well as then, promoting more information about this period. And honestly, I think that's the best way to combat people who misappropriate this, is more information about the actual period itself, because then people won't get so confused with these things. As well, groups like Baldur's Draumar, my favourite band, Frisian band, you can see they're using runes, they're using the Vegvisir, all this kind of thing to educate people about Frisian history, about Frisian identity, about the Frisian language, which I need not remind people is a minority language. So literally by banning some of these symbols, you might actually be negatively affecting the native minorities of Europe. Sweden. Anyway, but let's all just calm down and remember that a lot of the things that have been said about this are speculation. We don't know what the Swedish government's going to do. They haven't made anything illegal yet. Probably with the symbols, they're not going to go after those. It'll probably be the ones that are being used by neo-Nazi groups. But even then, I would advise caution where possible. If you'd like to raise your concern about this and perhaps send out a message, I've created the very unimaginative and alliterative hashtag #RunesNotRacism if you want to tweet about this and show your support for runes being used in a positive way in the world, and that we need not ban these symbols that many of our ancestors will have used. Then you can tweet about that, or tweet me and tell me I'm wrong, or whatever. Anyway, so thank you for watching. I thought I'd share the news about Sweden and my thoughts and this kind of thing about this, and I hope no one was too triggered by my opinions. But anyway, thank you all very much for watching. I really appreciate it. I'll have some new content up every Friday. I think I'm going to try and keep uploading. I've got exams next week, and then a lot of partying to catch up on, and releasing all of the stress that comes with exams. But yeah, I should have some more videos, and then I've got a summer, I've got some vlogs coming, which should be pretty good, even some like Viking themed vlogs from my reenactment event. So I hope you'll all stay tuned. Anyway, I've been Hilbert, and this has been The History.